Yeah. And then I've got a desk phone. It gets real, and then I got a desk phone at work, so it gets real interesting. All three's ringing. All righty. Good morning. Welcome out to Sunday school. I don't always do recaps. I guess I kind of like them. I do them at work all the time, so I figure we can do them in Sunday school. But we've been talking about the life of Joseph. I'm sure most of you has been here all the last few weeks to hear the story. But just to recap this morning and kind of get us back on track, if you remember, we found Joseph in the pit. His brothers got jealous of him. He told them about his dreams, and of course his dad made him the coat of many colors, and they threw him in the pit. And then they were going to kill him. They threw him in the pit. Then they decided they'd sell him to the Ishmaelites. It was much more economical to do that. So they made a little money and sold him to the Ishmaelites. So then you hear it said a lot of times, the pit to prison and then palace. So we find him then at Potiphar's house. Of course, that's another P you could throw in there. So Potiphar buys him from the Ishmaelites, talking about Joseph. And he's there in Potiphar's house. The Lord's with him. The Lord's blessing him. Potiphar's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And remember, he leaves his coat. The phrase, he got him out. And then it got himself in prison. So because she falsely accused him of trying to be with her instead of what the truth really was. So Joseph found himself in prison. Of course, the Lord was with Joseph. He found favor there. And it says in chapter 39, verse 23, that the Lord made it to prosper because Joseph was there. So the Lord prospered the prison because Joseph was there. Then if you remember, the baker and the butler, they got themselves in a little bit of trouble, got put in the ward. And one was restored to his duties. That was the butler. And then the baker was hanged. Well, then a couple years went by, and Pharaoh dreamed a dream. That's what we talked about last week. He actually dreamed two dreams. And the butler overheard, nobody could interpret the dream. And he said, "Oh, I remember my fault this day. There's a Hebrew, a man down in prison, Joseph, that can interpret this dream." So Pharaoh got him, brought him up, brought Joseph up before him, and Joseph interpreted the dream. And he told him, he said, it's not me, it's not my skills, but it's God. God interpreted the dream. God gave me the answers to the dream. So he gave God all the credit. Matter of fact, he said, "God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." So he said, Pharaoh said, you need to find you out somebody. You need to find somebody that can oversee this operation. You're going to have 7 good years, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And you need to find somebody that can be in charge and has some sense about this thing. And you need to fill up the storehouses. And that way you need to gather enough during the 7 years that during the 7 lean years, you're going to have enough food. And Pharaoh, I kind of like to dramatize a little bit. It's kind of like the Andy Griffith Show. But Pharaoh, he's looked all over town. And, Joseph's like, "Man, I'm right here. I'm the one." And he's like, "Yeah, right there standing in front of my face is the one that can do this." He said, "Joseph, you interpreted the dream. You've said I need to find somebody good and proactive. So guess what? You're the man. You're standing right here. I'm going to make you the man. You're going to be number 2. Nobody's going to be higher than you except for me. If at your command they're going to bow, at your command you see this thing through. I'm going to give you rank and power, and I want you to see it through." So Joseph done it. So what we saw last week that I really like is that Joseph was so smart about this thing is he not only kept up the storehouses and filled them full, but he also, when people would come, even the Egyptians, and let alone people from other places like we're going to see this morning, he sold them the corn. So, he was smart. He wasn't just giving this stuff away. See, and it's interesting to me, and I don't want to make it political, but see, that's so profound in this story, I think. This was not just a handout. "Oh, we're going through a terrible time. Y'all come. We're going to give. No, don't ever miss that. He sold it to them. he sold them that corn. He said, listen, you can come, we've got corn, but we're going to sell it to you. We're not just going to give a free handout. And so he sold them the corn, and then now his brothers have come. So that's where we ended last week. So we got all the way down to chapter 41, verse 57, 56, back in there. Let's start at 56. It says, so we're at chapter 41, verse 56. And the famine was all over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt, and all countries came to Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all the lands. So again, I always kind of like to dramatize this, so we kind of close the curtain. So the Bible's here's left us with a cliffhanger. It says, man, we're going through a terrible famine in all the land, so much that all the Egyptians are coming to buy corn. But now it's expounded upon that. It said, listen, and all the other countries are now feeling the burden of this famine, and so the curtain's closed. So man, it's left us like, oh man. So now the curtains open back up in chapter 42. Let's read in verse 1. Now when Jacob, so now the curtains have opened up back in Israel's house, back to Jacob's house. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, why do ye look one upon the other? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. So here's something, and again, I don't really have a real good outline today, so we're just going to jump around. But so here's something interesting in this whole story that's profound to me. I love it because we don't usually get this opportunity. So a lot of times in our life, we just have to live through the hardships, and then maybe every now and then the Lord will let us look back and see things. So think about how mighty and powerful and awesome God is right here. So God, we know later on that we're going to read this morning, God sent Joseph before them to preserve life. He did it in a way unconventional. He did it in a way that we wouldn't probably choose. He did it by way of a pit, by the way of a prison, and then on to the palace. So we know that. But here's the thing about God, is that's a great story. I mean, that's Bible worthy right there. But listen, God's so great that He also had a plan working behind the scenes, that this famine was so great in the land that now it affected other countries. And I think that's why it's interesting this morning that you need to put yourself in His place, that there was a day that Jacob woke up and said, hey, boy, we're running out of food. I've heard there's corn in Egypt. Why don't you boys go down to Egypt and buy some corn? Man, that's the God that we serve. It's miraculous enough to pave the way for Joseph, but God also let that famine reach out into these other countries, because that's the complexity of His plan. I mean, that's the complexity of God's plan sometimes. And we don't always see all those intricate details, but here we get to see them. Just think, I mean, if that famine wouldn't have reached out into Canaan and out into those places and those other countries, well, Jacob probably wouldn't have had no business to go to Egypt to buy corn, and Joseph wouldn't have met his brother. But I just want you to see how complex sometimes God's plans are. And here we get God pulls the curtain back and lets us see it. And I think it's fantastic. So verse 3, and Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother Jacob, sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befell him. So that tells you a little bit about Benjamin here. He must have been so young or something that he said, listen, I don't want him to go along because he might get into mischief. Y'all might lose him or something. So he says, he's going to stay behind. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was that sold to all the people of the land. There tells you something else about Joseph's character that I really would like to just teach about Joseph and his character. But so Joseph not only told Pharaoh, you need to get somebody that can put this plan in motion to make sure we've got enough food for the 7 lean years. But he ended up being the one that done it. Then he did do it, done it so much that they couldn't even count it any longer. So then he didn't just give a free handout, but he sold it to the Egyptians and to the other countries. And now, look at this. I love this. This is the number 2 man of Pharaoh. Now, I mean, I'm telling you, please don't miss this. This is the number 2 man of Pharaoh. Everybody that he encounters bows down to him. They'll do anything he says. Anything. There's one person in the whole land of Egypt that don't bow a knee to Joseph. One. But he's the one that you got to go see to get the corn. He's not sitting on some throne ruling and reigning and pointing fingers and say, you do this, you do that. That's what makes this man a good leader. He's not only proactive, he not only sells instead of just giving it away, but he's actually the one that's there, boots on the ground every day doing it. I mean, think about it. This should teach you, I mean, this gives you something good about business, right? He's the man. You go see him. You don't go see Joseph 15th in line, his sergeant or at arms or what. I mean, you go see the man himself. I mean, and all we've seen is pompery and pantry and all this for the queen. I mean, that'd be like, I mean, you think about that. I mean, they're doing all this stuff for the queen. I mean, that would be like, you've got to go see the prince. Now, the Prince of Wales. You're not seeing the king. You're not seeing Pharaoh, but you're not going to see all the many other subjects, but you got to go see this guy right here. He's the one controlling all this. That's the man. So I think that's important. I want you to catch that. It says, verse 6, and Joseph was the governor of the land, and it was that sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. You know, if you didn't ever think dreams come true, right there's your verse for it, because Joseph dreamed a dream and said that his brothers would bow to him one day, and right there his dream come true. Now, it wasn't a dream like we would think about, but it was a dream that his brothers would bow down to him, and guess what? Dreams do come true. His brothers came, and there they bowed before Joseph. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. You know, I think that's the other thing that the Bible, like, again, the Bible's not just paraphrasing. I mean, they are literally, I love that, they are literally going to see Joseph. I mean, these are even people from another country. They're from Canaan. They've come there, but they still have to be the ones that stand before Joseph. And then Joseph recognizes them. It's his brother. It's his brothers. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. So, if you will, you know, Joseph's been in Egypt for a while. He's number 2 to Pharaoh. I mean, I'm sure he probably don't look like a Hebrew anymore. He probably don't look like his family. And no doubt he's learned Egyptian, because later on, I think we cover that, but he brings in an interpreter. But he knows Hebrew as well. So he's speaking, no doubt, maybe an Egyptian to them. So they did. They don't recognize Joseph. They ain't seen him in a long time because they threw him in a pit. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, verse 9, and he said unto them, ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. So many times in the Bible, you know, they would send in spies, and if they saw the famine, that if Egypt maybe they didn't know about, well, I guess they didn't know about all the dreams and everything. So they didn't know that Joseph had put up 7 years of corn during the good years, and they just heard that there was corn in Egypt. So a lot of times in Bible times, the spies would come and spy out the land, because if Egypt was going through a famine and they hadn't been proactive, it might be a good time to jump on them. Kind of the same way with us. If you get wounded or hurt or get in trouble, that's when Satan pounces. Well, same way in Bible times. When you get down a little bit or a country gets down, the other country's going to pounce on them and try to take the land. So he said, y'all are spies. He said, y'all have seen this nakedness, and you've come to spy out the land. Verse 10, and they said unto him, Nay, my Lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's son, we are true men, thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan, and behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. So now, boy, they just told on themselves, didn't they? So they said, listen, there's 12 of us. You got the youngest that's back with the daddy. He didn't come along on the journey, and one's not. One's dead. Well, they're talking to the one that's supposed to be dead. Talk about seeing all-time ghost story here. So they're talking to the one that's supposed to be dead. And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely ye are spies. And he put them all together into the ward 3 days. It was neat when I was studying this, it was talking about, Joseph kind of 2 times there says, kind of swears by Pharaoh, if you will. And, it had some different things and thoughts. And I mean, you probably have some different things and thoughts about that. But, it's almost, it's almost kind of like Joseph saying, I'm kind of watching out for Pharaoh. I'm going to hold you here because you're spies. Because to me, it's almost like, and I guess you can interpret it many ways, but maybe somebody would have questioned him. I mean, a few years have gone by here of him selling corn. He ain't really ever threw anybody in prison that we know of. So now all of a sudden, boy, this crowd's really made him mad. So it's kind of like, he's almost saying, well, by Pharaoh, I'm going to do this because I'm trying to protect him. So that way nobody questions what Joseph's doing. It says, And Joseph said unto them the 3rd day, This do and live, for I fear God. Verse 19, If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye carry corn for the famine of your houses. But bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall the words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. Now notice this. I want you to listen here this morning, verse 21. And they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother. So, boy, now all those years ago has come back to their mind. And they said, oh, man, we're guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore, in this distress come upon us. He thought, boy, I mean, they're thinking about those verses of sowing and reaping, and thinking, boy, be sure your sin's going to find you out. They think, oh my goodness, after all these years, we've gotten away with this, and now look what mess we've got ourselves into. And I think it tells you something about their character. I mean, I think all in all, they were pretty good folks, but boy, Joseph really just upset them when he told them about the dream and about his coat and all that stuff. And now, man, they're guilty of this one thing. They said, boy, what we did to our brother has come back to haunt us. Verse 22, And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and ye would not hear. Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. They said, man, I tried to tell y'all, and y'all wouldn't listen to me, and now look. Look what mess. I mean, can't you see them brothers there bickering and fighting amongst themselves, saying, man, look what kind of mess we got into. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. So see, that's where it tells us. I mean, like whatever spoke Egyptian and whatever they spoke, and then he was speaking through an interpreter. I mean, he really put on a good show, so they didn't know who he was. But they didn't know that Joseph could overhear them bickering back and forth amongst themselves. And Joseph heard all that. And I mean, think about that. I mean, I'm talking like listening to somebody say, well, golly, see, I told y'all when we did that to our brother then many years ago, look, that's come back to haunt us now. And Reuben's like, I told y'all not to do that day. I told y'all that his blood was going to be required. I mean, he's sitting here, he's so happy to see them, but in the same regard, he's sitting here listening to them confess their sins. And, I mean, think about that. And verse 24 tells us a little bit more about that. He says, and he turned himself about from them and wept. So it tells us the severity of that he was so shook up by it that he turned from them and went kind of back behind his tent or wherever he goes in his room there. And, man, he was weeping. It really got to Joseph. Thought, man, they're sitting here admitting this right. I mean, they're still talking about this to this day. Verse 27, and as one of them, so now he's left, he's filled their sacks up. Some of this I've got to paraphrase for time's sake. But so he sent them about their journey. They've, with this sack of corn, and he put the money on the top. So now they've took off, and as one of them, verse 27, opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money, for behold, it was in the sack's mouth. So he opened it up, and it's like, well, wait a minute, all the money. So he thought that he was supposed to have a full sack of corn and no money. Now he's got a full sack of corn and the money sitting on top. So listen at verse 28. It says, and he said unto brethren, my money is restored, and lo, it is even in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, what is this that God hath done unto us? So remember, that's pretty fascinating to me. Remember, we saw back in Genesis 12 and 20, what is this that thou hast done, when Abraham and some of them went down to Egypt when they weren't supposed to, and God plagued Pharaoh and plagued Abimelech for that. And then Joseph prospered because he did right down in Egypt. He prospered and was doing right. And now, look, we see, what is this that God hath done unto us? So now, boy, they're saying, well, wait a minute. God's really got us in a fix here. And they came unto Jacob, their father, into the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell unto them, saying. So they basically said, listen, we went down, we met this man. There was apparently, I mean, can you see him telling this story? And again, I'm going to paraphrase some of this. But so he's telling this story. He's saying, look, we went down, and you ain't going to believe it. There was this man selling corn. And, I mean, you had to bow to him and everything. And he thought we were spies. But yet we told him about our family. Because through this, it's like Jacob's like, well, how does he know about all this? He says, well, he asked us, said, y'all have a father? And we said, well, yeah, he's alive. And they said, and we've got a younger brother. So they're explaining this story to him. They're saying, listen, we told him a little bit about our family. Told him, we've got 12 brethren. One died, one was not. We don't really know what, And then Benjamin. So they're telling this story and saying, well, now, Dad, we've come back with some corn, but our money's in here too. I mean, we're sorry. I mean, we tried, we failed. This is just, it's weird. I can really see them saying that. I mean, we don't really understand all this. One minute he thinks us we're spies. Next minute he gives us corn and gives our money back and sends us to fetch our brother. So we get all the way down. So they get back home and they have this conversation. So now chapter 43, verse 1. So again, it's like the curtain's closed, curtains open back up. And I love the Bible, but I really like how the Bible talks about this story, because it says, and the famine was sore in the land. So it's like, listen, nothing's really changed. So God is still pressing down that action's going to have to be taken. And he wants to remind us of that here. He's still pressing down on the land with this famine. And it came to pass, verse 2 of chapter 43, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, go again, buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest us unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet a brother? So he's saying, well, why did you even tell him you had a brother? So again, they went through this whole conversation about, well, he asked us, we told him, it was a little weird, but anyway, we had this back and forth, and but you don't understand, if we don't show up without him, and again, I think the Bible's telling us here again this morning that, they said, listen, you don't understand. We've got to go see that man. When that man sees us in the back of the crowd, he's going to be like, hey, I remember y'all, you got your brother Benjamin with you? And if we tell him no, he's just going to turn us away or kill us or put us in prison. You don't understand. And we've got to go see him. There's nobody else to see. We can't go during the night shift because they ain't open. We got to see him. So anyway, so they finally convinced their father. So let's look over in verse 11 of chapter 43. And it says, And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this, take the best fruits in the land of your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds, and take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto the man. I can kind of see here Jacob's like, hey, listen, presents worked before, let's do it again. It's like, hey, we gave a present one time to my brother, and boy, that turned out pretty good, so let's just try this thing again. Take a present with you. Don't take too much honey, but take a little honey. Take a little bit of stuff here. We're kind of going through a famine, but give him a present. Take your brother and get down there and get us some corn. We're about to die. And he said, go ahead and just take double money, because maybe it was just an oversight. Maybe they're mad at you over it when you get down there, and they just thought you forgot to pay them. It was really your fault instead of his. So take double money. Give them the first and give them this and buy corn. So, verse 16, And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, Bring these men home and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. So here's this crowd come again, and now Joseph's acting all weird again. He said, man, go kill the best stuff, go kill a calf, whatever they're going to kill here, and make a dinner ready. These men are going to dine with us. So they do all that. So then let's go down. So then they explain to Joseph here in the next few verses. He says, they kind of tell him, here's our gift from our father. Our father sent this. This is our youngest brother, Benjamin. They said, we've also brought double money. Apparently you forgot to take our money last time, so we're going to give you that. We're going to give you some more. And we want to fill our sacks with corn, and we'll go about our way. And then Joseph brought the brother that he had kept back out to them. So verse 27 of chapter 43 says, And he asked them of their welfare, and said, Is your father well, the old man of whom ye spake? Is he yet alive? So again they said, well, he was asking about his daddy. And he answered, Thy servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. So they sat down and they eat. Again, I'm having to paraphrase. We got a lot to cover, but we're about out of time. So they sat down and ate, and they all sat, oldest to youngest, you know how they do. And they get to Benjamin, and Benjamin gets 5 times more food than anybody else at the table. So again, Joseph's kind of acting a little weird. You know, people starting to catch on to this just a little bit and different things. But Benjamin gets 5 times the food. So if we go on down, so he sends them about his way. He sends them about their way again. So now this time he fills all their sacks full of corn. And this time Joseph slips a silver cup, his silver cup, I guess, in one of the sacks. And wouldn't you know, I think it's Benjamin's sack he puts it in. And so then, and I don't really, you know, maybe, again, I don't really understand Joseph's maybe whole reasoning behind all this, but this is what he decided to do. So he filled their corn, he put the silver cup in, and then as soon as they left, he went and turned to his men, Joseph did, and was like, listen, get up and overtake them. They've stole my silver cup. And he knew they'd find it. So they took off after them. They've caught up with them. And verse 14 of chapter 44, verse 14. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that ye have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? And Judah said, what shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak, or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out our iniquity of thy servants. So watch this. This is some repentance here. So, and maybe that's kind of, you know, again, maybe this was the Lord's way working behind the scenes to make them repent and make them say it to Joseph. So listen, they supposedly don't even know what Joseph, they supposedly don't know Joseph knows what they're talking about, but we know he really does, because he's the one they're talking about. It says, God hath found, verse 16, out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also, with whom the cup is found. So basically right here they repented. They said, listen, we got to clear ourselves. You know, we messed up a long time ago. You don't even know nothing about this, but boy, this is the Lord's way of returning evil upon us. And, you know, we're here. We're your servants. We are. Benjamin is. I mean, we're sorry. We messed up. So they go back through some back and forth and stuff here. We don't have time to read all that. You can read it in your time if you'd like. But chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. So he sent his servants out, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. So, I mean, he sends them out, but they hear such a commotion that they hear him. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. So one, I mean, shock of the century here. Now, this is Joseph. Now he's speaking in their tongue, obviously, because he's talking right to them. He don't have an interpreter there anymore. And, I mean, boy, talk about, like, all-time comebacks, paybacks. I mean, karma, this is getting a little rough, isn't it? So I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. They said, you know, there's 2 years have passed. And God sent me before you to preserve you prosperity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord over all his house, and a ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Hasty and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not. So, just to end this morning, just in a couple minutes here. So Joseph here, when he tells his brothers, it's finally, this has reached a climax. He's told his brothers who he is. Of course, they're shocked. I mean, they just thought they seen a ghost. I mean, they can't even speak in his presence. I mean, they're floored. I wonder how much of this they even heard. So he explained to them that he's their brother whom in Egypt. Now watch his answers, and again, I think this tells you something about Joseph, that I think that, again, that this is why he's a type of Christ and a lot better Christian than I'll ever be, is after all this, look at his answers down through here. Verse 5, but don't be grieved nor angry with yourselves, because this, for God did send me before life. It was all about God. Verse 8, he says, listen, so now it was not you. It's not your fault. But God sent me. God sent me to preserve life. He sent me, and now I'm a ruler in Egypt. And then even down in verse 9, he said, listen, go tell your father and say, listen, it's fine. I'm not angry. I'm not mad. I'm not hurt. I'm not killed. God hath made me Lord over all of Egypt. I mean, again, I wish we had time to talk about that answer, but his answer is so profound. It's like, listen, y'all don't understand, like, don't be thinking I'm mad. Don't be thinking that, God did all of this. But he's also not charging God foolishly by saying that. And so many times we see people do that. We say, well, God's done this. Well, but he's not even meaning it that way. He's like, listen, it is fine. I didn't even understand it at the time. You hated it. Now that you've done it, you've repented. But just don't worry, because I know, and I've stayed so close to God, that, listen, it was just God. God was in every aspect of it. In every part. So this ends here in the next chapter, chapter 46, by God telling Jacob, and I really like this, and y'all have heard it enough come out of my mouth that you probably understand it too, but God never told Abraham to go to Egypt. He went down there and made up that story about Sarah, his wife. He never told him to go. He never told Isaac to go to Egypt, but yet he went anyway when there was a famine on. But here's the first time we see, and we know now what God orchestrated behind the scenes and put all this stuff together. So Jacob reaches out to God and is like, what do you want me? Here's his son. I think this kind of shows the closeness with Jacob and God as well, is he's like, what do you want me to do? I heard my son's down there. And God tells him, says, listen, there's a famine in the land. I want you to go to Egypt. I'm going to take care of you there. Matter of fact, he says, I want to go to Egypt with you. And he tells him that in the next chapter. And think about that, because all these other great patriarchs, they just kind of did what they want to do. God said, don't